My name is Rick Collins. I know Dan through the gym, as I see many of the people here knew him through that capacity. I'm also an attorney, and in fact a litigator like Dan, and a member of the Nassau County Bar Association that Dan was a member of also, but I knew him primarily through the gym. And those who know him through the gym know that he applied that same passion and that same courage that he applied through his love of the law when he showed up at the gym. He was a warrior in the gym as much as he was in the courtroom. Those of us who know him, worked out with him, know that Dan didn't believe in warming up. Wanted no part of that. He would come through the door in his shorts and his t-shirt, whatever the weather was, with his big gym bag, all 280 pounds of them, 285 pounds of them. And when he appeared in the gym and was happy to see you, you knew it. Because Dan would hug all of his friends in the gym. And it was the kind of thing, you know, I look like I never worked out a day in my life next to Dan. Because when Dan came walking in and he gave you that hug, that was 280 pounds of pressure coming down. You know, I was bracing my knees. I was, getting ready for the contact. You know, and you knew it. He was that kind of guy. Through the months as Dan was getting sicker, I remember hearing about this video that had been made back when Dan was in college, and it was a video of Dan wrestling a 1,200-pound brown bear. Has anybody seen this video? A few of you have. Well, I asked Dan if I could see it at some point, and Dan, kept putting me off, and then finally, a few weeks before he died, I was at his house, and I finally had the opportunity to see this video. And it was everything that I had expected and hoped that it would be. It was made back when Dan was in college, and apparently it was in a bar, and they had set up this makeshift wrestling ring for an exhibition that they brought this huge brown bear around. And the bear was muzzled, but was not declawed. And they had like $1,000 reward, a prize, for anybody who could pin the bear. It was an exhibition, no one ever really expected they were going to pin a 1,200-pound brown bear, except for Dan. Because obviously nobody told Dan, and we all know the way he was, Dan wasn't going in there to lose. To Dan, this wasn't an exhibition. This was Rocky Balboa, who's fighting, the heavyweight champion of the world. He's like, I'm going to win this. That bear, forget it. And you actually, it's all videotaped, and you see as the bear, the bear's like warming up, the bear's ready to go, and Dan comes out, and Dan's ready to go, and he was a good, probably about 280 at that time, looked much younger, had like this little long kind of blonde hair in the back. I think they called him Bam Bam, and they actually introduced him, which is his bouncer name, and they actually introduced him as Bam Bam when he got up there. And of course, he got into position with the bear, and kind of like the wrestling move. The bear is like one paw over Dan's shoulder, and Dan has his hand over the bear's shoulder, and they ring the bell, and Dan starts wrestling with the bear. I think that probably the competition for the bear in the past had not been quite up to par with what the bear, really could handle. And the bear has this like surprised look on his face. And suddenly Dan comes out from the bell, and Dan is pushing the bear back. And the bear is going back across the ring, and Dan actually slams the bear over, and the bear goes down onto his back. But he's able to lift one shoulder up before Dan. But the bear is clearly, flabbergasted by this, and a little annoyed, because actually, the bear is figuring, these guys have paid me to do this job, and I'm looking kind of bad. And so then the next few minutes of the match is the bear is back on his feet, and Dan and the bear are dancing across, wrestling, each trying to pin the other. And finally, the bear is clearly annoyed. He's had enough. He's ready to end this thing. And the bear kind of gets up on top of Dan and starts putting his weight down to just drive Dan into the ground. And this is 1,200 pounds of brown bear. Now, his feet are on the ground, but you figure about half of him is about 600 pounds. And that 600 pounds is down on top of Dan's shoulders as he's trying to put Dan down into the mat. And you see Dan goes down, and he buckles a little bit. His legs are braced. He goes down. It's like a squat position as the bear is going, all right, you're going down now. This is over. And all of a of a sudden, Dan begins coming back up from the squatting position and begins coming fully back up. And you see like the bear's face is like, what is up with this guy? And the match finally, it timed out. The match finally finished. Dan couldn't pin the bear, but the bear could not pin Dan. And it was actually a draw. And by the end of the match, it was like at the end of Rocky, when he says, you know, don't want no rematch, there isn't going to be one. You know, more than happy to end it. But that was the kind of spirit and passion that I knew of Dan. I'm the editor of the newspaper for lawyers in Nassau County, which is the Nassau Lawyer. And the January issue actually goes out to every lawyer who is admitted to practice and he gets his mail in Nassau County. And I'm going to do a piece about Dan, a memorial for Dan in that. I'll probably speak to both of you. We exchange our information. It'll go to all lawyers in Nassau. I'll make sure there's some extra copies. I'll get them to both of you, so anybody who wants copies should be able to get them through you. I'll need a picture to go in there, and hopefully it'll be a fitting tribute to Dan. Thank you very much.